Thanks for joining us in the plenary talk, the first plenary talk of our conference, Virtual Math Fest 2020. Today, we have with us one of the eminent mathematicians, Professor R. Balasubramanian. It's a privilege to have him with us today. I would like to say a few words about him. So he was the director of IMSC Chennai for a long period, from 2000 to 2014. His research is mainly on number theory. He has received a lot of numerous awards. To name a few, he was awarded the BM Birla Award in 1990. In 1990, he also got SS Bhatnagar Award. He was awarded the Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian award in India, in 2006. He also received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2013. He is a fellow of INSA and also AMS. Yeah, there are other awards too. So, welcome, Professor Balasubramanian. So today, the title of his talk would be Number Theory in India After Ramanujan. Yeah, we welcome you, sir. You can start.
Good evening to all of you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening to all of you, and let me thank the organizers for this opportunity to really talk about the number theories in India after Ramanujan. Before I begin, I would like to say a few words about Professor C.S. Seshadri, who passed away, as many of you are aware, a couple of days ago. Professor Seshadri was a doyen of modern Indian mathematics and a highly distinguished expert in algebraic geometry. Besides being a great academician, he was also a great institution builder. He founded the mathematics group at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences and later created Chennai Mathematical Institute. I was fortunate enough to be associated with him for nearly 5 decades now. In fact, it was Professor Seshadri who asked me to move to the Institute of Mathematical Sciences from TIFR in late 1984. And later, when I had to assume some administrative responsibilities, he was always present as a senior colleague to advise and encourage. I shall miss him greatly. Yeah. Now, of course, the number theory, we start with Srinivasa Ramanujan. And about Srinivasa Ramanujan, a lot has been written, and therefore I am not going to talk much about that, except that, of course, I would quote the distinguished astrophysicist Chandrasekhar, who says, "The facts of Ramanujan's life were more than enough for aspiring young Indian students to break their bonds of intellectual confinement and perhaps soar the way that Ramanujan did." We trace Ramanujan's influence through the story of his life and his mathematical themes from the time of Ramanujan's death to the middle of 1980s, and we restrict to analytical number theory because that is only where my expertise lies. And the reason why we have decided to the middle of 1980s is whatever that is happening after 90s, for example, all of you are aware what's the number theory that is going on, and therefore there's nothing much to talk about. And in fact, if you are interested, for those who are interested, there's a scholarly article by Professor Rita Prabha Munshi of the development of number theory with the title Analytical Number Theory in India, during 2001 to 2010. And the reason why he has stopped at 2010 is that, as most of you would have known, we had the International Congress of Mathematicians in 2010. And till that time, what happened is what he talked about. And of course, there was one more reason to which I will come a little later. And much and varied contribution was made to analytical number theory from India during the above period. Therefore, in fact, this lecture, which when I gave first, in fact, this seems to be somewhat popular, and I am giving it here for the third time. And that we had a title, Highly Composite, to just meant to reflect this fact rather than the title of a famous paper of Ramanujan on highly composite numbers. And we start with Anand Rao. And his birth and early life and education was in Chennai, which was Madras at that time. And in 1914 sailed for England, only 4 months after Ramanujan. And 1916, he completed both parts of the Cambridge Mathematical Stripos examination, and he was elected a fellow of King's College and came under the influence of Professor Hardy. This was the thing of the Ramanujans. And in 1918, he published his first paper, which was a short note on PLMS and on lambda K summability. And as you might have known, that's the time when the summability was an important subject, and most of the Indians who went abroad started their career by working on summability. And suppose lambda n is an increasing sequence of positive real numbers tending to infinity, and k is a positive real number, then you say a sequence is said to be lambda k summable if summation lambda n less than or equal to x minus lambda n power k Cn divided by 1 over x power k tends to the constant C. And Hardy has proved that this lambda k summability of a sequence Cn satisfying an appropriate growth condition implies convergence of a series. Another Rao noted that Hardy's proof was incomplete and modified Hardy's argument to fill the gap. And this is probably one paper which you should read to see how the clarity of the exposition and attention to detail evidence. And in 1918, Anand Rao won the Smith Prize for an essay written the previous year, partially under Hardy's supervision. In his essay, which is also related to summability, not surprising, Anand Rao derives a number of results for generalized Dirichlet series, generalizing what was known earlier for ordinary Dirichlet series by Hardy and Littlewood, and published a part of his essay in PLMS in 1932. And he returned to India in 1919. He was appointed as Professor of Mathematics at the Presidency College, Chennai. And I will talk about his first paper, which he published from Chennai. There he gives a simple proof of the factorization of the entire function s minus 1 into zeta s. And this is this Hadamard's factorization, e power ps into product 1 plus s over 2n, e power minus s over 2n, product over rho 1 minus s over rho, e power s over rho. This is the standard Hadamard's factorization for entire functions. And ps is a linear polynomial, and the b is a constant, and the rho is varies over the zeros of zeta s that are not real. And the principal difficulty was in proving ps is a linear polynomial. Anand Rao gave an elegant proof avoiding direct consideration of Hadamard's canonical factors by exploiting additional properties of the zeta function. The crucial ingredient is the Cauchy residue theorem applied to the boundary of a suitable rectangular region, giving 1 over 2 pi integral zeta prime z by zeta z dz by z into z minus s equal to 1 over s into zeta prime s by zeta s plus 1 over s minus 1 minus 1 over s zeta prime 0 by zeta 0 plus summation 1 over x into x minus s. Here x varies over the zeros of theta s lying in the contour which we have taken. By Borel-Crabtree theorem, then we constructed a sequence of large rectangular region such that the integral on the left hand side tends to 0 as m tends to infinity, and passing to the limit and rearranging the term, we complete the proof. And later, K. Chandrasekharan, about whom we will talk a little later, he showed that this method yields an alternative proof of Hadamard's theorem in general. Also can be extended to obtain Navier-Stokes factorization theorem for meromorphic functions. Later, Anandarao turned to questions on elliptic functions, representation of integers or sum of squares, and finally to Waring's problem. This Waring's problem is probably one title which we would be probably seeing again and again in this lecture. And he developed an excellent school in summability and Tauberian theory that attracted a number of visitors, including the American mathematician Stone. He mentored all of India's important number theories, with the exception of Chawla, in the period following Ramanujan. For example, Professor S.S. Pillai, Kirkkanavaram Vijayaraghavan, K. Chandrasekharan, or were students of Anandarao. I mean, these were the great number theories immediately after Anandarao. And now we come to Pillai. And Pillai has worked on various aspects of number theory, including Diophantine approximations. There is something called the Pillai's conjecture, and Waring's problem, to which I will come a little later, and an important work due to his student Sathe, which is what I will talk about now. This is a problem which arose from the work of Hardy and Ramanujan on the rarity of round numbers. And this led to the introduction by Selberg of an important method in analytical number theory, later generalized by Deligne, for the estimation of partial sums of Dirichlet series with singularities that are not poles. Our focus here will be the key contribution to this problem from S.S. Pillai, who was a student of Anandarao, and the L.J. Sathe, who was a student of Pillai. Okay, therefore, what is the theorem which was proved by Hardy and Ramanujan? They proved that almost all natural numbers have log n prime divisors. That is, the number of natural numbers which have either much more or much less than log n prime divisors or of measure 0 in the counting measure. In particular, if omega n is the number of distinct prime divisors of n, and if f of x is any function increasing to infinity, then the number of n's up to x for which omega n minus log n is bigger than fn into square root of log n is little o of x, which means that this number divided by x as limit x goes to infinity equal to 0. And this, in fact, was the genesis of probabilistic number theory, because it was Yardash and Turan who tried to prove this result using probabilistic methods. And then Yardash and Katz proved that this omega n minus log n by square root of log n in fact has a Gaussian distribution. Now let's give an idea at all how one would expect such a result. For a positive real number, let pi k of x denote the number of integers having exactly k prime factors. Since all the integers can be partitioned into integers which have exactly k prime factors for every k bigger than or equal to 1, you get the first line, which is the integral part of x equal to 1 plus summation pi k of x. And on the other hand, x also you can do x over log x into exponential log x, and then you can expand the exponentials, and that you will get x into log x power k minus 1 divided by k minus 1 factorial into log x. And then you can probably ask whether in the expansion of x, the two terms correspond. In particular, is it necessarily true that this pi k of x is around x into log x power k minus 1 by k minus 1 factorial log x? And Hardy and Ramanujam replaced, and this was actually proved by Landau, that for a fixed k, the expectation is correct. That for a fixed k, pi k of x is around x into log x power k minus 1 by k minus 1 factorial log x. And now you are asking, if k goes to infinity as a very small function of x, is this really true still? And Hardy and Ramanujam replaced lambda's asymptotic inequality with an upper bound, which is a times x into c plus log x power k minus 1 by k minus 1 factorial log x, where both a and c are independent of x, and use this to prove that result, that the round numbers have the number of prime factors is around log n. And Hardy asked the following question: is this asymptotic valid when k goes to infinity as a small function of x? For example, let's say k is equal to around log x. If k is around log x, is it still true that the number of elements n up to x, which have exactly k prime factors, satisfy the asymptotic formula expected? And it seems that T. Vijayaraghavan, about whom we will see later, conveyed this problem to Pillai, and this is Pillai. And I should probably add here that thanks to the effort of Professor Thangadurai, we have now the collected works of Shivashankar Narayan Pillai. And therefore, I would urge all of you to just have a look at what Pillai has really done in the various things. And he had his earlier education in Nagarkoil, Tamil Nadu, and Thiruvananthapuram. He joined the University of Madras on a research fellowship in 1927. He moved to Annamalai University as a research associate, and he remained in Annamalai University till 1941, the most productive period of his life. And he obtained DSc in mathematics from the University of Madras. And he was the first one to get a DSc in mathematics from that. And he, in fact, managed to prove that Landau's asymptotic holds for k, which is little o of log x. Also, he proved that pi k of x is bigger than constant times log x power half for k equal to log x and a positive c. And this result was obtained at that time by Yerdash also, and that paper appeared actually in Annals. And Pillai did not publish his research, which were obtained in 29. And in 43, Pillai moved to Calcutta University, where he had a short stay for a student. And he suggested Hardy's problem and put at his student's disposal all his manuscripts on this problem. And so it proved that the asymptote remains valid for every k less than e power log x. In particular, they solved Hardy's problem completely. And he used a rather complicated induction argument. You know, at that time, one would call a proof to be an elementary proof, not necessarily if it is a simple or something like that. An elementary proof means that you do not use complex analysis. You use only real analysis to prove the result. And Fatah's proof was elementary in that sense, except for the fact that he uses prime number theorem. And at that time, the proof of prime number theorem was only known by non-elementary methods. That is by using some complex analysis. And the Fatah's proof is a complicated induction elementary proof, which runs to around 134 pages, and it appeared in 4 parts published in the years 1953-54. According to Pillai, he solved the problem in the course of less than 2 years after the problem was posted. And Selberg was the referee to that paper. And Selberg, in his referee report, says the results of Fatah's paper were beautiful and highly interesting. And he also mentioned in his research by using by non-elementary methods, which means by using methods of complex analysis, one can estimate the partial subs of Dirichlet series that have singularities that are not poles. That is precisely what happens in this case, and gave an alternative to Sartre's proof. This method was later generalized by Delange, and it is now called the Selberg-Delange method. And now we come to the next person, Sarvaraman Chawla. And as I was telling, I mean, he was in North India and did not come under the influence of Anand Rao. And he was one of the best known number theorists from India to have followed in the tradition of Ramanujan. That is from his background. And Chawla's collected works also appeared. And again, I would urge you to go through those collected works. And Chawla was born in London in 1907 and grew up in Lahore. Went to Cambridge for his PhD, which was completed in 1931, which was supervised by Littlewood. And he returned to India and in 1936 became a professor at the Government College Lahore, a position once held by his father. And he immigrated to the United States in 1948. And I do not think that he came to India after 48 at all. And in fact, I spent a year with him in Princeton, where I urged him to make at least one trip. And he said that he would do it, but he never did it. And he died in 1995 in the United States. Now coming back to Chawla and Pillai. Chawla and Pillai maintained a regular correspondence for 20 years, starting in the late 1920s up to 1 month before Pillai's death in 1950. The earliest letter available from Chawla to Pillai is dated 8th January 1929. In this letter, Chawla discusses, among other things, the number 175959000, which is the smallest integer that can be expressed as a sum of two positive cubes in 3 different ways. And most of you will probably recall the taxi cab number. This letter ends with Chawla expressing hope that they will soon begin their proper work. Their first joint paper appeared in 1930. They obtained an asymmetric formula and an omega result for Ex, which is defined by summation Pn is equal to 3 over pi square times x square plus E of x, where Pn is an Euler function. And probably I should say what this omega result means. You know, when you write an asymptotic formula like this, summation Kn equal to 3 by pi square into x square plus Ex, and you are interested in the error term, and you are interested both in an upper bound and the lower bound, to say that this E of x is bounded by something, getting an upper bound for E of x is called O result, and to say that this E of x cannot be smaller than something, there are values of x where E of x is rather big, such a result is called an omega result. And they got an omega result, and that result remained unbroken for a long time, till I think Montgomery got another method to improve that result. In Chawla's letter to Pillai in April 29, Chawla conjectures that Ex changes sign infinitely often. And this is surprising because earlier than that, Sylvester had conjectured that Ex is always positive. And that was proved by one single example by Sarma, that E of 820 is positive. And Yerdash and Shapiro developed a method to prove that the Ex changes sign infinitely often. The second theme of Chawla and Pillai's work has its roots in Indian mathematics. For a natural number n, for solutions of the so-called Pell's equation, x square minus ny square, the length L of the period of the continued fractal representation is very important. And Chawla Pillai proved that L equal to O of square root of n into log n. This O notation is what I explained a few minutes back. This simply means that this L is less than or equal to constant times square root of n into log n. That's exactly what the own notation means. And then the theme of their work was around Waring's problem. And since Waring's problem is the one which will come again and again, I will probably talk about it more or less at the end of the lecture. So the next we talk about Thirukannavaram Vijayaraghavan. Vijayaraghavan, like Ramanujan, also communicated with Hardy and worked with him. And his main interest was in the approximation of algebraic numbers. And he was also interested in summability, as everybody was at that time. And one of the important works of this is on the so-called Piso Vijayaraghavan numbers, or a PV numbers as they are called. And a PV number is a real algebraic number which is bigger than 1, all of whose Galois conjugates are less than 1 in absolute value. Therefore, if you have a real algebraic number which is bigger than 1, with all its Galois conjugates in absolute value is less than 1, all the Galois conjugates lie within the unit circle. They are called the PV numbers, and they appear essentially in study of the uniform distributions of the numbers like lambda times alpha power n. Close friendship with Chawla and Pillai also brought him to questions in analytical number theory, but he is much more famous for these Diophantine approximations and summability. And that more or less ends the first epoch. S.S. Pillai, unfortunately, died in an air crash. I think he was going to an ICM meeting to be followed by going to Princeton Institute of Advanced Study, but that could not happen. He died in an air crash in Egypt in 1950 when he was on his way. And Sarvadhan Chawla, as I was telling, immigrated to the United States, and T. Vijayaraghavan died in 1955. And that sort of ends the first epoch of our description of the Indian number theory, and we come to the second. And the second is the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. The Tata Institute of Fundamental Research was opened in Bombay, now Mumbai, in 1945 with Professor Homi Bhabha as its founder director. And K. Chandrasekaran joined in 1949, and we will have a lot to talk about KC. Invited by Bhabha, Chandrasekaran met Bhabha at IIS Princeton, where he was visiting after his PhD with Anand Rao at the University of Madras. K.G. Ramanathan joined in 1951. He was a PhD from Princeton with the MLRT. Ramanathan's master's degree from the University of Madras. And Chandrasekaran and Ramanathan, strongly influenced by Siegel, who visited the Institute of Study when they were there. And Siegel visited TIFR at the end of 1950. And the Siegel's visit is also going to play an important role in what I am going to say a little later. And at that time, probably most of you know that TIFR had a lot of visitors from abroad who gave beautiful courses, and the notes were taken, and the students were influenced by that. And about Chandrasekaran, K. Chandrasekaran and Raghav Narasimhan joined a little later. Their series of papers on the approximate punctuation, which is one of the important things about which I will talk a little later. Omega results for arithmetic functions. The omega result is something what I said, that you have an arithmetic function, you take the summatory function of the arithmetic function, that is, you take a function f of n, which is an arithmetic function is a function which is defined on integers and need not be defined on the real numbers. Like, for example, the divisor function, the number of divisors of L. This is a function which you can define only on integers, and there is no obvious way you can do it on the real numbers. And take such an arithmetic function f of n, and take the summation n not exceeding x f of n, and you have a main term, and you have an error term, and then you would like to know how small is the error term, and you will also like to know what are the omega results for the error term, and which means essentially to prove that this error term cannot be much smaller. The first major work on theory of zeta function after Chawla. And then there was this great work of C.P. Ramanujan on cubic forms and Waring's problem, which I will talk about later. and the work of Ramchandra on the Kronecker limit formula, and all the above work were thesis done in TIFR. And now we come to Komaravelu Chandrasekaran. Komaravelu Chandrasekaran is studied with Bochner the number of independent solutions of a pair of Dirichlet series satisfying a Riemann type function equation. This was one of the important problems that at that time, which is also an important problem even today, that if you have a function which is satisfy the functional equation of a given type, then is this function really is the same as the known function which is has the same functional equation. For example, you can take the functional equation for the Riemann zeta function and then ask if some other function satisfies the same functional equation, is it necessarily the same as a Riemann zeta function? And this was the type of work which Hamburger started, and Casey had a lot of work on that. And now it's Perelli and Kotarski who are really doing a lot of work on this theory. And an important device in the theory of L function is the so-called approximate functional equation, which essentially means that it's the given function is given by a Dirichlet series. Therefore, you have the function f of s, which is given by summation an by n power s. And summation an by n power s will converge to f of s in the region of convergence. But is it possible that suppose you take the summation an by n power s and truncate at an appropriate place, then it will still give the value of f of s with a small error if you truncate it at an appropriate place. And okay, that can be done. And then you can ask, okay, I want even a smaller approximation, therefore probably sum of two such series, will it approximate the original function? This is called the approximate function equation, which provides an approximation to L function by truncation of the Dirichlet series. And the important point is that the length is less than square root of t. And any of you who have worked on Dirichlet series, particularly on the mean value of the Dirichlet series, would realize that having the length of square root of t is very important, because if the length is much more than that, it will be somewhat difficult to get the mean values. In a much quoted series of papers with Raghavan Narasimhan, he generalized significantly the well-known approximate function equation for the Riemann zeta function due to Hardy and Littlewood, and he gave a number of applications. In particular, they obtained an approximate function equation for the Dedekind zeta function of a number field. And now we come to C.P. Ramanujam. Chakravarti Padmanabhan Ramanujam, known to his colleague as CPR, was an expert both in number theory and algebraic geometry. And I am not going to talk about his work in algebraic geometry, better people would do that. I would probably confine myself to his work in number theory. In the first year in TIFR in 1957, he wrote up the notes on algebraic functions of one variable, which was given by Max Doering. And as I was telling, it was, many important visitors visited TIFR in the earlier periods and gave lectures, and the students were asked to take notes of that, which gave a good introduction to the subject to the students. And for his thesis, which was written under the supervision of K.G. Ramanathan, he proved that every cubic form in 59 variables over a number field has a non-trivial zeros. The interest in the result lies that the bound is independent of the number. And he realized that this method is equally applicable to variance problem. I have not still talked about the variance problem, even though I have mentioned it so many times. But let's see. Let K be a number field, and let SKD be a set of dth powers of totally positive integers in K. Siegel proved that there exists a constant such that any n in SKD can be written as a sum of at most g dth powers. Siegel conjectured that the g can be taken to depend only upon d and independent of k. And such a proof normally has two steps. What one says is that you prove the theorem locally, and then you use some local Grover principle. And by choosing the major arc in a suitable way, in the Ramanujan-Hardy Littlewood circle method that we will talk about later, CPR managed to prove that one can take GD to be 15d⁵, improving a fundamental result of Birch that GD can be taken to be d⁴2d². And in fact, on a personal side, on the basis of this contribution, he was promoted as an associate professor, and he definitely felt that he did not deserve it, and in fact, he protested against it, and therefore it was left to his colleagues to convince him to take up this promotion. And we come to Kanakanahalli Ramachandra. And I was talking about this article by Rita Pratap Munshi, and he was talking about the years 2000 and 2010. And the reason why he stopped at 2010, he gives a reason. He says, at a more personal level, K. Ramachandra, who spearheaded research in analytic number theory in India, passed away in January 2011, bringing to an end an era. This is person about whom I will talk a little more, what exactly he did. Professor Ramachandra is arguably the best analytical number theorist in India after 1960, who made a mark on different sub-branches in number theory. In his first paper, which appeared in Annals of Maths, he proved some remarkable new result on the construction of a ray class fields of an imaginary quadratic field using calculations involving special modular functions in connection with the Kronecker-Silbit formula. And of course, this word, remarkable new result, is not mine, it is Eushler in Mathematical Reviews. Calculating units of a cyclotomic field generated by the pth roots of unity was done by Kumar long back for his researches on Fermat's loss theorem. The question of studying the units in the cyclotomic field generated by mth roots of unity is a much more difficult problem. Ramachandra took up this case and constructed units, so called Ramachandra units, which of course he could not construct all the generators of the subgroup, but on the other hand, he was able to construct some generators which generate a subgroup of a finite index of the group of units. And now coming to, then after that, he sort of took out of some sieve methods, and using sieve methods, he was able to prove the following result. It is believed that an interval of length square root of n starting from n, therefore if you take n to n plus square root of n, then it contains a prime number. But the present knowledge does not permit us to prove this result even on Riemann hypothesis. And Riemann hypothesis, instead of square root of n, you can go up to n power half plus epsilon. And in fact, the conjecture, really due to Selberg, is that probably even if you take an interval of length log square n, constant times log square n, you should be able to get a prime there. But even the square root of n seems to be, we are not able to prove that. Ramachandra raises the question whether the interval has an integer which has a large prime factor. Therefore, if you take n to n plus square root of n, and whether it has a large prime factor, and he proved that there is an integer m in that interval having a prime factor larger than m power half plus 1 over 30. His proof involves a clever use of sieve methods and an exponential sum estimates due to Van der Karpet. This question has led to a lot of subsequent work. If you go to the Masonite and things like that, you will see a lot of work has come out of this paper. And therefore, first he started with algebraic number theory and Kronecker-Silbit formula and so on. And then he moved to sieve methods. And there was a time when Professor Alan Baker proved a nice result on transcendental number theory. And it was natural for Ramachandra to enter the field. His first result in this theory is called the 6 exponential theorem, which was proved by Serge Lang around the same time. And that is an important theorem there. And there is, of course, a 4 exponential conjecture. And those of you who are interested in transcendental number theory probably should look at an article by Professor Waldschmidt on Ramachandra's contribution for 6 exponential theorem and the 4 exponential, the conjecture of 4 exponential. We now explain the result of Baker. What is this result of Baker in transcendental number theory, which is very important. Let A1, A2, etc. An be the logarithm of algebraic numbers. Under these conditions, Baker proved that if A are linearly independent over rationals, then they are linearly independent over algebraic numbers. He also got a lower bound for the linear combination of these numbers. The lower bound of Baker was later improved by many mathematicians, including Ramchandra, and Ramchandra is better known for arithmetical application of Baker's theorem. And I should point it out that this is the time when Professor Shore joined Ramchandra as a student, and some of the work which I am going to describe in transcendental number theory is the work done by Professor Ramchandra and Shore. And even though Ramchandra did move away from this area, Shore has got many beautiful results in this subject. And now the thing is that besides proving the theory of Baker, besides proving the theoretical results of the Baker's theory, Ramchandra was able to get some good arithmetic applications from Baker's theory. We shall restrict to one such question. Let n plus 1, n plus 2, etc., n plus k be a set of consecutive integers. One would like to know whether there exist distinct primes p1, p2, etc., pk, such that pj divides n plus j for every j. Therefore, if you take a long interval and for each one of the element you want to associate a prime such that this prime pj divides n plus j. Grimm conjectured that if the set of consecutive numbers do not contain a prime, then this is always possible. And I will make one more comment on that. Using Baker's theory of linear forms, Ramachandra, Shore, and Tiedemann proved that if k is at most constant times log n by log n whole cube, then it's always possible. We should remark that this result of 1974 has resisted all attempts to improve till date. After some important papers in Hardy-Ramanujan circle method and the paper related to Siegel-Roth theorem, Ramchandra started working on the Riemann zeta function, and that was his favorite subject till the end. He didn't go, I mean, after taking the problems on Riemann zeta function, he never considered either circle method or sieve methods or anything like that. And I will talk about his mathematics now. Now, he was not only a great mathematician, he also encouraged many young number theorists. For example, many a time, Kannan Soundararajan from Stanford has told me how this encouragement at a crucial time helped him to shape his career. And now let me talk a little about some mathematics which Ramchandra did. Let Fs be a holomorphic function and given by an absolutely convergent Dirichlet series. And let M be an integer which is less than h power 1 minus epsilon. You take the Dirichlet series and truncate it. This truncation is what we will be talking about again. And then Bs equal to Fs minus As. And as I was telling, if this, because of this truncation, this Bs may not even be convergent. But on the other hand, we would like to see that this Bs is not too large even in the region where the function is not convergent. And therefore, in particular, we would like to show that this f of it mod it whole square dt is bigger than or equal to h times summation mod ein square with n less than or equal to n. And the importance in this particular result is that if you can really truncate the Dirichlet series at h, for example, then a theorem of Montgomery and Vaughan called Hilbert's inequality would give an asymptotic formula of the expected size. But we do not really know how to truncate it at h and to prove that the error is small. And what Ramchandra was interested in getting a lower bound. And this lower bound, of course, is related to omega result, about which I will talk later. And the way Ramachandra did is something called multiple averaging. And using this multiple averaging, we averaged the relation over the family of the intervals, and this multiple averaging essentially enabled him to do that. And yeah, this is somewhat technical. Sometimes I may be able to explain, but not today. And he applied this with f of s is equal to mod zeta s over 2k, and he got an omega result for the zeta values. For example, there's a paper of Ramachandra in Proceedings of the Indian Academy of Sciences, where he was able to get a lower bound for the values of zeta functions on the critical line. And he also applied to arithmetic functions. He applied this to arithmetic functions whose generating series are meromorphic. We get omega results for the summatory functions. For example, in a paper with Subbarao in Arithmetica, he takes the ANs to be the coefficients of zeta 2s into zeta 3s divided by zeta 6s. And then you take an arithmetic formula, which is C1 x power half plus C2 x power 1/3 plus then you have an error term. And what you are interested in knowing, how big is this error term and how small is this error term. And for example, in this particular case, it would mean that if you take a sigma an, then this error term cannot be smaller than omega of x power 1/10. This is one method. See, the earlier methods, essentially due to Landau, would give you something like an x power 1/12, and this method of Ramachandra gave a result for x power 1/10. And here probably I should also mention that for a long time, this method of getting omega results, both for the values of the Riemann zeta function as well as for the error terms of the summatory functions of the arithmetic functions, this method developed by Ramachandra remained by far the strongest method to prove omega results. For example, there's a paper by Schinzel where he mentions how essentially this Ramachandra's method helped him to get an omega results. And till more or less, this remained true till more or less the early 2010, when Kannan Soundararajan was able to introduce his resonance method to get a better results, particularly for the zeta functions. And then there's another result of Ramachandra, which is also rather important, and this is this so-called Cooley-Huxley contour. This is the situation where you have a Dirichlet series f of s, which is equal to summation an by n power s. You are not interested in the summatory function of n up to x, but you are interested in the summatory function over a short interval between x and x plus h. And if you are interested in the summatory function from x to x plus h, then you have this integral c minus it to c plus it f of s x plus h power s minus x power s by ds, and this integral will give you the sum. And how do I evaluate this integral? And any of you who have some familiarity with the Perron's formula would know that you have to just move the line of integration. But where can you move the line? You can move the line only till you meet the singularities of x. Therefore, if there are singularities to the right of theta, then for example, you can move only up to theta. But Ramachandra found a method that you can actually move a little further, still avoiding the singularities. And in fact, what he did was, the general method is to move the line of integration from sigma equal to c to sigma equal to beta, lying in the neighborhood of u containing the closed half plane to which f extends as a meromorphic function. Because if there are singularities, you will have residue at s equal to 1 gives the main term. To show that the contribution of the integral is small, we need to move the integration further to the left. The obstruction to doing this arises from possible singularities, which may not be necessarily poles. And in fact, the first paper in which Ramachandra introduced this method essentially had logarithmic singularities. And Ramchandra notes that in a number of situations of interest, the singularities are sparsely distributed close to the line. And this sparseness may be exploited to overcome the obstruction to moving the line of integration. This is done by considering a suitable zigzag contour that goes as deep as possible into the region while still avoiding the problematic singularities of F. Error from this contour is shown to be of a smaller order than H when the number of singularities in a strip of vertical length is small. And this method now has been used by many people, particularly if you are interested in finding out the symmetry function of arithmetic functions which are in a small interval, in an interval of the type x to x plus h. And now finally I will come to the variance problem about which I will be talking, and let me say. Therefore, you take an integer n and you want to write as n as a sum of your sum of kth powers. The question is, how many kth powers do you really need? Therefore, let little gk denote the infimum of s such that every n can be written as a sum of s non-negative kth powers, and a capital Gk denote the infimum of s such that every large integer can be written as a sum of s non-negative kth powers. Because in this problem, of course, if you try to do some calculations, you will find that these small numbers give you a little problem. But on the other hand, for the large numbers, the problem is not there, simply because, for example, if you take cubes, then, and if you are thinking of writing a small number like 20 or 21 as a sum of cubes, there are not too many cubes for you to play with. Since there are not too many cubes to play with, probably you may need more number of cubes. Whereas on the other hand, if you take a number which is around 1 million, and then which you want to write that number as a sum of cubes, then you have a lot of cubes to play with. Since a lot of cubes are to play with, then probably you may not need too many cubes to write that number as a sum of cubes. And again, only abstraction that can come essentially is from the local considerations. This local global principle is one thing which would come in this subject again, and I don't think I would have time to explain what the local global principle means. For example, this is a theorem of Lagrange that G2, little g2 is equal to capital G2 is equal to 4, which means that every integer can be written as a sum of 4 squares, and even if you are restricting yourself to the large integers, if you forget the small integers, if you restrict to large integers, even the large integers need sum of 4 squares. There are a lot of large integers which need sum of 4 squares. And the variance conjecture that G3, the sum of cubes, should be 9, and some of the summands which you need for a 4th power should be 19, and so on. And the so on doesn't first of all make sense, because I mean you want to write a general formula. What exactly is? And the first result is essentially due to Hilbert. Hilbert proved that Gk is finite, which means that if you are taking any k and if you are trying to write n as a sum of kth powers, then there is a finite number such that every n can be written as a sum of kth powers with those finitely many summands. And the proof is essentially this identity that if you have x1 square plus x2 square plus xn square power k, this can be written as another linear combination power 2k with an appropriate coefficient. And therefore, in particular, if you do it for 2k, then you can do it for k, and so on and so forth. And now you can again try to do some experiments and try to see what are the numbers which probably needs a lot of kth powers. And when you do some experiments which you do to find out numbers which needs a lot of case powers, then very soon you will find that if you have numbers which are bigger than 5 power k, therefore already there are 6 power k, therefore already there are 5 case powers to play with: 1 power k, 2 power k, 3 power k, 4 power k, and 5 power k. All of them you can use. Then already the number is small. Therefore, the worst number happens to be the number, the biggest number, which is less than 3 power k and which is 1 less than a multiple of 2 power k. Let me repeat. The worst number happens to be the biggest number, which is less than 3 power k and 1 less than a multiple of 2 power k. For example, for squares, the 7 would be the 1, because the 7 is the highest number, which is less than 3 square and 1 less than a multiple of 4. And that essentially means that you know the worst number, and then you try to see whether this number will need how many case powers, and then try to see that every number can be written with only those many case powers. And how do we prove that? The way to prove that is essentially, suppose you have an fz equal to Cn with z power n, which is holomorphic, then this coefficient Cn are given by 1 over 2 pi into integral mod z equal to r fz divided by z power n plus 1 dz. This is Cauchy's theorem. And this, how does one integrate this? Because fs, you don't know much idea at all. But there are cases where the dominant contribution to this integral giving Cn comes from the r, which are sufficiently close to 1, from neighborhoods of the points r into e power 2 pi I p by q, where p by q has a small denominator q. And rather surprisingly, this was an observation which was made by Srinivasa Ramanujan before he went to England. And he applied this formula for essentially finding out the coefficients of the inverse of the theta function. And this was a formula which highly impressed Hardy, and therefore one of the reasons why Hardy called him. And they worked out for the inverse of the theta function, and that is essentially what led to all these things. And nowadays it is called Ramanujan Hardy Littlewood circle method. And yeah, this is this GZ, which is Hardy and Littlewood applied the same method to this Larynx problem, and they got this bound capital Gk is resolved equal to k minus 2 into 2 power k minus 1 plus 5. And you should remember that the Hilbert's method does not give any such a nice bound. Vinogradov's method is completely effective. We will come to that. And Vinogradov's method rendered the following two-step strategy: compute an n1k such that the number of kth powers required to represent does not exceed s. That is, you prove the result for all large n first, and then verify it for small n. Because this method again has a main term and an error term, and you can prove that the error term is smaller than the main term only for large enough. And therefore, that's exactly what you do. You get an asymptotic formula for the number of representations, and then prove that the error term is smaller than the main term. And the years 1935 to 40 saw an intense amount of the work. A leading role in this effort was played by S.S. Pillai, and essentially independently by Dawson. And therefore, they write 3 power k equal to a times 2 power k plus b. When k is between 8 and 100, or when k is 100 and b is small, they got an exact value for gk. And when b is bigger, then they got a correct expression for gk, which means in some sense what Pillai proved is that if this number is bigger than 5 power k, or if the number is bigger than 4 power k, so that when you have 1 power k, 2 power k, 3 power k, and 4 power k to play with, okay, that may be a difficult case. But if the number is bigger than 5 power k, and if you have 5 kth powers to play with, then this expected result is true. 2 power k plus 3 by 2 power k minus 2. Therefore, the worst result can come only from numbers which are less than 5 power k. And here it was already known G7 is 143 and G6 is 73. This is changing. The first three results were obtained in the last 1940s. And the determination of G6 by Pillai is arguably the most important result from India in Pillai's time. And then Dixon proved that B is equal to 2 power k minus 1 minus 8 is impossible. Rughuwande proved that B equal to 2 power k, always Indian contribution. Niven proved that B equal to 2 power k minus a minus 2. Then Gk is equal to 1 more than what is expected. And Zinninger proved that in 1965 G5 equal to 37, leaving only G4, which was also proved a few years earlier. And more or less, that's where I would stop. And any such a like, and this is the one where C.P. Ramanujam extended to algebraic number fields. Again, the same circle method. And you look at those elements which is of the form r into e power 2 pi I to p over q, where q is a small denominator, and that is where you expect the contribution to the integrand to be the maximum, and then you do this contribution, and therefore they are called the major arc, even though the measure of the major arc is very small, and the rest is a minor arc when the number is approximated by r into e power 2 pi I p over q, where q is rather sufficiently large, and in which case you prove that this contribution is somewhat negligible. And the question is, how do you choose the major arc appropriately? And in fact, this way the major arc was done by Ramanujan for this problem which I was explaining earlier, namely the inverse of the theta function. And in that case, he actually proved that that is the correct way to take the major arc. That is where the major contribution comes. Outside the minor contribution, outside is minor contribution. But in the case of Waring's problem, it is first of all not clear whether that is the way the major arc has to be taken. And these are the questions which led to Ramanujan to choose the major arc in the appropriate way to prove the bound to be independent of the number. And it is customary to acknowledge those who helped in preparing this manuscript. Let me do that. And there are many to whom my gratitude is due. In particular, I want to mention Professor Surya Ramana from Harishchandra Research Institute. Suffices to say that in this presentation, the article is his and the lip service is mine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for delivering such an elaborate account of post-Ramanujan history of number theory in India. That was of so much information.